This past year, I've been doing episode reviews for the currently in production Star Trek series, and that's been fun because writing a review of a TV episode or a movie is different than writing a video essay exploring a particular question or presenting a specific thesis, which is the kind of thing I do in my Trek Actually series and my other video essays. It's another format, it works other muscles, and it feels good to be doing that after not doing it regularly for a while. And just recently, I got a comment from a viewer that was very nice, but that also got me to thinking about some things that I've thought about a lot in the past, that I've talked about from time to time in previous videos, and that I'm going to talk about now for a little bit. In the comment to which I'm referring, this viewer said that they enjoy watching my Star Trek reviews because, unlike other reviewers they've watched in the past, I am objective. It was intended as a compliment, and I take it as one, and I very much appreciate it. But here's the thing. I'm not objective. And actually, neither is any other critic. And that's okay. Criticism, whether it's of movies, TV shows, literature, stage productions, fine art, food, whatever, is always necessarily subjective. It's the opinion of the critic. When you strip it down to its essence, a critic's job is to experience the thing, watch the movie, read the book, eat at the restaurant, whatever, and then articulate their thoughts and feelings about that thing in a way that their audience can understand. Depending on where that review is published and who the intended audience is, a critic might use some specialized vocabulary, might refer to some complex concepts that a general audience might not be familiar with, but regardless of the audience, regardless of the approach, it always boils down to the critic's opinion. And again, I don't say that to diminish the value of what critics do, or the potential value. At least I say it because that's just the way it is. We all see the world through our own eyes. We can learn about the experiences of others. We can empathize, but we can only ever actually have our own experiences. True objectivity is unattainable, and criticism is no exception to that rule. Consequently, there is no such thing as an objectively good or an objectively bad piece of art. Earlier this year, I reviewed Season 2 of Star Trek Picard. I watched and reviewed every episode as it was released. I didn't like it. I didn't think it was very good. I found all sorts of problems with it. Serious, often baffling problems. Problems that resulted from writing that was sloppy, lazy, unfocused, and flawed at the level of basic storytelling mechanics. And I can go into great detail about all of that, but I'm not going to do that here. The point is, even though I can articulate why I think the season was bad in great detail with specific examples, it's still ultimately my opinion. It's subjective. The fact that I think Season 2 of Star Trek Picard is very bad and can explain why I think that beyond just saying it sucks doesn't make it objectively bad. Star Trek Picard Season 2 is bad is my opinion, not a fact. There are people who disagree with me. There are people, and I do take them at their word. I don't assume they're bots or paid shills or whatever, who genuinely believe that the second season of Star Trek Picard was terrific. I could not disagree more. That was not my experience watching that show at all, not even remotely. But my experience is no more valid than theirs. If they think the show was great, that doesn't mean they're wrong and I'm right. It means we have differing opinions. I've brought this up before here and there, and sometimes I'll get some pushback from folks who argue that actually there is such a thing as an objectively good or an objectively bad piece of art, because when we judge the quality of, say, an episode of a TV show, we appeal to certain widely agreed upon principles. And I don't disagree with that last bit. There are widely agreed upon principles which guide critics, most critics anyway, in crafting reviews, but that doesn't make those reviews objective. Generally speaking, qualities like internal consistency, a well-paced plot that moves fast enough to keep us interested, but not so fast that important beats don't have time to land and have impact, and characters who are clearly drawn and behave in ways that make sense for them are regarded as hallmarks of a good, well-told story. But even if there was universal agreement that those qualities must be present for an episode of a TV show to be considered good, and there isn't actually universal agreement about that, but even if there was, that still wouldn't mean we could say that a given episode is objectively good or objectively bad. Even if we all agreed that those things I just mentioned should be the standards for what is a good episode, we would still be choosing, as individuals, to accept those standards. We would be making the subjective judgment that, yes, internal consistency is necessary for a good episode. It doesn't have to be that way. There's nothing compelling us to regard internal consistency or any other quality that an episode might have as necessary for it to be good. But it goes beyond that. Even after we accept those standards, they still have to be interpreted subjectively by each of us. For example, while I agree that internal consistency is important, I weigh it differently, depending on the scale at which I'm applying the standard. I think it's very important within a single episode or single storyline, if that storyline is told across multiple episodes. I think it's slightly less important across an entire multi-season series, although still pretty important. And I think it's much less important on the scale of a decades-long multi-series, multi-film franchise like Star Trek. That's me. That's how I feel about it. Nobody else has to feel that way about it. Lots of people feel differently. Some are absolute sticklers for internal consistency and rebel at the slightest contradiction. Others care even less about it than I do. Nobody's right. Nobody's wrong. It's a matter of taste and personal opinion. Notice that I didn't say it's a matter of personal choice. It's not a matter of choice. Deep Space Nine isn't my favorite Star Trek show because I consciously chose it to be. It's my favorite because it resonates with me the strongest, because I appreciate its writing and acting and other qualities the most, because I find myself more deeply invested in its characters and their stories than in those of other projects within the Star Trek franchise. None of those reactions are actually within my conscious control. And that doesn't make them objective. Taste is subjective. That's why we mean something very different when we say that something is a matter of taste than we do when we say it's a matter of fact. Our individual tastes are shaped by all sorts of things in our experience, and while we don't have the power to just instantaneously change them at will, they are still the products of our experiences. They are still subjective. Often when someone says that someone else is objective, they aren't being that literal. What they mean to say is that the person they're describing is unbiased. But even that goes too far. I'm definitely not unbiased. Not as a critic and not as an overall human being. Like every other human being, I carry around countless biases. Biases that influence how I perceive and interpret my experiences. Biases that, for the most part, I'm not even aware of. What I think most people mean when they compliment someone by calling them objective, and what I think the person who left the comment that started me off on this subject probably meant, is that the person they're describing is not so hopelessly biased that their opinions are rendered unthoughtful. Like I said, I have biases. Most of my biases I'm probably not even aware of, but I do make some effort to correct for the ones I am aware of. For example, if a TV show or a movie features an actor I generally don't like, I try not to let my bias against that performer have an undue influence on my opinion of the work as a whole. Like I mentioned earlier, this isn't entirely in my control, but I've found that being aware of my biases helps me to keep an open mind. And sometimes, if I keep an open mind long enough, I discover that my bias was unfounded. and I'm able to get past it. I used to have a pretty strong bias against George Clooney. As an actor, as a person, he's always seemed like a good guy, so far as I can tell. I didn't like his acting style. I didn't like the shows and films he was in. I saw an ad for something with George Clooney in it, and my reflexive reaction was negative. But then I saw the film Three Kings, a great movie, and Clooney gives a good performance in it. And from that point on, gradually, my feelings about Clooney as an actor began to change. Now, over 20 years after I saw Three Kings for the first time, I've gone from thinking George Clooney was a bad actor to thinking he's a pretty damn good actor. Now, that's not all because of me. As he matured and became a bigger star with greater influence over his own career, Clooney began to choose more interesting films to star in. He stopped making shitty Batman movies and run-of-the-mill political thrillers, started working with brilliant directors like Steven Soderbergh and the Coen brothers, and began directing his own films, some of which, like Good Night and Good Luck and The Midnight Sky, have been really outstanding. But if I had held on to my bias against Clooney, I might not have even seen a lot of those movies, and my opinion of him would be unchanged. Not that it would matter to anyone but me, but had that bias remained in place, and had I continued to allow it to influence my choices, I would have missed out on some good movies over the years, and I'm glad I didn't. All of this is a very long-winded way of saying that while I am truly humbled by the compliment, I can't accept it because I'm not objective, and neither is anyone else. And that's okay. I don't think objectivity or perceived objectivity is the most important quality for a critic to have anyway. The two most important things a critic can be are humble and honest. Being humble just means that you recognize and accept that your opinion is just that. Your opinion, not law. You can say shit like The Last Jedi is objectively awful all you want, doesn't make it a fact, just makes you sound like a pompous, overbearing dipshit. Being honest as a critic means that you mean what you say, that you offer your opinions, your reactions without exaggeration, without apology, truthfully, and thoughtfully. As I've reviewed the new episodes of the various Star Trek shows this year, I've liked some and I've not liked others. My overall assessment of Season 2 of Star Trek Picard was that it's not very good. My overall assessment of Star Trek Strange New Worlds so far has been just the opposite. I found it outstanding. My feelings regarding Season 4 of Star Trek Discovery were more mixed. Some of it I liked very much. Some of it didn't really work for me. But no matter what thoughts and feelings I'm expressing in a review, people who watch it can be assured that they are truly my thoughts and feelings. I'm not acting as a shill for the shows I'm reviewing, and I'm not rooting for their destruction either. I'm not objective, I'm not unbiased, but I am sincere. So, if you're a critic and you like something, tell your audience why you like it, what you like about it, articulately and truthfully. Don't be a cheerleader. It's not a critic's job to sell the thing they're reviewing or to make excuses for it. If you don't like something, same deal. Be truthful about what you don't like and why. Don't be a hater. Don't trade in performative outrage. It's not a critic's job to vilify the thing they're reviewing either. Be direct. Be passionate, but don't be false, and don't be toxic. A good critic is someone who shares their opinion of a piece of art so that those in their audience can decide whether or not to experience it for themselves. We read or watch or listen to critics because their tastes often line up with our own, or because they're good writers or compelling presenters who have interesting and insightful things to say. They help us to consider and articulate our own opinions and to better understand contrary opinions. Their opinions aren't any more valid than anyone else's, but they can be useful voices in our ongoing cultural conversation about the art we make and experience and use to define ourselves. None of that happens if we can't trust our critics to be humble, to accept that they are not authorities, but voices in a conversation, and honest, to mean what they say. If you're a critic, try to be a good one. If you read or watch or listen to critics, pay attention to the good ones and ignore the bad ones, the ones who want to sell you something, the ones who only tell you what they think you want to hear, the ones who try to bullshit you. The internet, and traditional media too, honestly, is full of lousy critics, and life is just too damn short to waste time paying attention to them. That's my opinion anyway.